Oh, I didn't hear the footsteps at first, but I heard the second pair, gravel crunching behind me on the hiking trail, slow, uneven, like someone dragging a boot. I figured another camper was coming up the path, so I stepped aside and I stopped walking. And the steps stopped too. I moved again and they followed. I turned around and no one was there. But a few yards back in the dirt, a fresh footprint appeared. Right as I watched it, something pressed into the soil from nothing at all. Then came the sound. Metallic, striking stone. Clang. Far off in the woods. Clang. Steady, patient, and getting closer. I ran the rest of the way to the campsite and didn't stop until the firelight came into view. That's when I noticed the lantern sitting beside Mara and realized the footsteps, well, they had stopped at the edge of the trees. The fire had burned low when she finally spoke. Not crackling low, but wrong low. The woods were silent. No insects, no breeze. Just that heavy quiet that makes you feel like you're interrupting something. Mara lifted the soot-black lantern beside her boot. "This ain't mine," she said. "Never was. I just hold it now." Someone chuckled. Then from the darkness behind us, one step, dragging gravel. We turned. Nothing there. But the sound had stopped exactly when we looked. Mara didn't even glance back. "He hates being watched," she murmured. Black Ridge Hollow used to be a mining town, but a fire burned through the number 3 shaft for 3 days underground. 17 miners trapped inside. The foreman locked the doors from the outside to stop it from spreading. And later, they found him burned near the entrance, and he was still holding a lantern. After that, lights began moving along the ridge at night, floating, not carried, and sometimes footsteps would walk beside you, but never ahead. The first disappearance left a perfect campsite. Coffee was warm, maps stacked neat. Outside the tent sat a lantern, glowing green. Mara said she didn't believe any of it until she came here alone. She heard metal striking rock from inside the sealed mine. Clang, clang, clang. And boots dragging behind her shoulder, heat on her neck. She turned and saw a burned hand gripping a lantern. The figure behind it shedding coal dust like smoke. It spoke only once. 17 left. 18 remained. And it offered her the light. She woke up miles away at dawn, still holding it. It always came back when she tried to leave it. So she returned it here. But the mine entrance was gone. Only a rock wall scratched with a number. 18. The fire beside us shifted as if stepped into. From the trees came dragging footsteps again, getting closer. Then metal struck stone behind us. We all spun around. Nothing. When we faced the fire, the lantern's flame had turned green. Mara looked at us calmly. "It's counting again." A shape stood just beyond the trees. We all ran, but on the road home, the footsteps followed only me. They stopped when I stopped. The lantern was sitting in my passenger seat, still warm. Lit and scratched into the glass. 19. I didn't touch it for 3 days. It stayed right there in my truck. Didn't matter if the doors were locked. Didn't matter if I parked under the sun. Every morning when I went out for work, The cab smelled like hot metal and wet stone, and the glass was warm. Not warm like a bulb, warm like something had been holding it. The fourth morning, I noticed the dirt. Black dust scattered across the passenger floorboard. Not road dust, but thicker, greasy. When I rubbed it in between my fingers, it smeared like charcoal paste. I didn't remember driving anywhere dirty, but there were boot marks too. Just one set, starting at the passenger door and ending at mine. That night, I stayed awake listening, and at first, nothing. Then around 2:13 a.m., a sound from outside my house. Gravel, slow dragging steps across the driveway. They stopped beneath my bedroom window. I held my breath. Seconds passed. Then a single metallic strike rang out from somewhere far away. Clang. Not outside, not inside, but underground. I looked at the truck keys sitting on my dresser. They were vibrating, very slightly, in rhythm. Clang, clang, clang. So I drove back to Blackridge the next day. I didn't plan to, just found myself on the road toward it. Like missing an exit you know you should take, but your hands don't turn the wheel. The closer I got, quieter everything became. No wind across the trees, no birds crossing the sky. Even the tires sounded softer on the pavement. And when the trailhead came into view, my engine shut off. Not stalled, just stopped. The lantern on the passenger seat, it flickered green, and the passenger door unlocked by itself. I followed the path without remembering deciding to walk. The campsite was empty. No chairs, no fire ring, no sign anyone had ever been there. Only the footprints, dozens of them, circling the clearing. All facing inward, like people once stood watching something in the center. My footprints joined them without me noticing when I stepped inside. That's when the ground answered back, a hollow echo beneath my boots. Not soil, not rock, a roof. The metal clang came again, loud now, directly below me. Dust sifted upward through the leaves. Black dust, breathing dust. The earth in the center of the clearing sank inward with a soft collapse, opening a narrow slope into nothing but darkness. Not a cave, but a passage carved smooth. Mine walls. Fresh, straight marks lined the stone. Something had been digging up for a long, long time. I should have left. Instead, I lifted the lantern. The flame steadied, and somewhere below, the footsteps started climbing towards me. Slow, dragging, and patient. I realized then the sound wasn't echoing anymore. It was approaching air. Each step louder than the last. The lantern grew hotter in my hand until I almost dropped it. But the moment I tried, another footprint pressed into the dirt beside me. Empty ground shaping around an unseen boot, waiting for me to move. So I did, down the passage, because I suddenly understood something Mara never said. The number doesn't rise when he takes someone. It rises when someone follows. And behind me, another set of steps began descending too, matching mine exactly. The air had changed about 20 steps down. Not colder, oh no, not colder, but older. Breathing in tasted like pennies and ash, the kind that dries your throat before you even realize you're choking. The walls were cut clean and straight, but not by machines. The marks were uneven, staggered. They were made by hand. Pickwork, recent pickwork. The lantern lit only a few feet ahead of me, yet I could hear space far beyond it. every footstep carried away into tunnels I couldn't see, returning a moment later slightly wrong, like someone else had stepped when I had stepped. Behind me, the second step kept perfect time, not gaining, not falling back, just there. A passage opened into a chamber supported by blackened beams. They were burned, not charred old wood, burned once and preserved, as if the fire had passed through but never left. My light stretched across the floor and found tracks everywhere, hundreds of them layered into the dust. Boots running, boots turning, boots stopping suddenly, all facing the same direction, toward a sealed door at the far end. Iron, half melted, claw marks scored across it from the inside. And the clang came again, not ahead of me, but right beside me. I turned, and the lantern revealed a pickaxe leaning against the wall, swaying gently like it had just been sat down. The handle was smooth, where hands had worn it for years. Black fingerprints covered the grip, fresh. Another sound followed, not metal this time, but breathing. Several breaths, uneven, waiting. I raised the lantern higher. The dust shifted along the floor, not blowing, moving around shapes that weren't fully there. Impressions pressed downward as if men stood shoulder to shoulder, packed tight around the chamber's edges, watching the door, waiting for it to open. Something brushed past my sleeve. I flinched, and the footsteps behind me finally broke rhythm. One step closer than mine. For the first time I understood. They weren't following me. They were keeping me in place, keeping me in line. I looked back the way I'd come. The tunnel behind me was darker than it should have been, not shadowed, filled like the dark itself had weight. A single dragging step came from within it, way closer than before. The old iron door creaked, just a little, not opening, but flexing. And from the gap came heat, deep furnace heat, carrying a smell of oil lamps and burned cloth. Then a voice layered out into the chamber. Not one voice, but many. Dry throats speaking the same word at once. Foreman! The lantern flared green so bright the walls vanished. And in the light, I finally saw them. Not bodies. Outlines burned into the air. Helmets, shoulders, hands still clutching tools. 17 figures pressed towards the door, and a space behind them. Empty, waiting. The dragging steps stopped directly behind me. A hand closed over mine on the lantern handle. Cracked skin, fused fingers. The voice spoke beside my ear, tired as collapsing earth. 18 remained. The figures at the door slowly turned toward me, and the iron began to open inward. The door did not swing open. It bent. Iron pulled inward like soft clay, groaning in long, slow stretches. Heat poured through the gap. Not a blast, but a steady breath that smelled of oil, smoke, and wet stone after the rain. The figures didn't rush it. They stepped back, all 17 of them, making room for me. The hand around mine tightened on the lantern handle. The skin, well, it felt brittle, like charcoal that should crumble, but it didn't. I tried to pull away. The tunnel behind me answered, a single dragging step forward. No escape that way. Inside the doorway was not a tunnel. It was the shaft, but it wasn't burned out like it should have been. The support stood whole, the rails intact, the tools neatly stacked along the wall, preserved in a moment that never ended. And in the center was a table, a foreman's planning table, ledger open, lamp beside it, still lit. The flame, it was green. The pages turned on their own, stopping halfway through the book. Names filled the paper in careful handwriting. 17 listed in order. Beneath them, one blank line. Figures gathered behind me, silent now, not angry, not pleading, but waiting. The hand on mine guided the lantern toward the table. I understood then. He hadn't come for revenge. He'd come for relief. A sound rose from the shaft walls. It was distant at first. Pick strikes, hundreds of them, echoing from deeper below, far past where any tunnel should exist. The ground trembled with the rhythm, like something underneath was still digging upward after all of these years, trying so desperately to reach the surface, trying to be counted. The foreman's voice rasped beside me. Took their air, kept the fire. Lantern hovered over the blank line. Took their names and kept mine. Green flame flickered. Someone must hold the light. My hand moved without permission. The lantern touched the paper. Heat sank through the pen lying across the ledger. My fingers closed around it before I could resist, and the ink inside the nib began to darken, and then it began to smoke. The steps behind me stopped dragging, and for the first time, they stood still, waiting for the stroke, waiting for the count. But the pick strikes below grew louder, faster, no longer steady. They were desperate, like more than 17 were down there now. More than ever were. I hesitated, and for the first time the grip on my hand tightened hard enough to hurt. The voice, it lost its patience. Right. The tunnel behind me exhaled furnace heat. The fingers leaned closer, the blank line waited, and the lantern burned brighter, turning from green towards orange. You see, the color mattered. I didn't know how I knew, but I did. Green meant waiting. Orange meant chosen. The moment the flame shifted, the chamber reacted. The figures around me drew back, not in fear, but in recognition, like a signal had finally been given after years of standing in line. Below us, the pick strikes changed rhythm. They weren't desperate anymore. They were organized, working. The hand around mine loosened slightly, guiding the pen toward the blank line in the ledger. One name, and it would all end. That was the promise sitting in the heart of the room. 17 trapped, one responsible, balance. But the picks kept hitting from deeper down. More than 17, far more. Layered echoes climbing through rock that should have held nothing at all. I looked at the list again. The names weren't fading. They were repeating. Under each miner's name, faint impressions pressed through the paper, like the same 17 had been written again and again over decades, each time followed by a new blank line. Not a memorial, but a rotation. The foreman's voice came from just behind my shoulder. Light goes out. They walk. I understood. He hadn't sealed them in to kill them. He'd sealed the fire in to stop something else from coming out. Every time someone carried the lantern away, the line changed, and someone new took his place, holding the light at the door, keeping it shut, keeping whatever was below from reaching air. The number scratched into the stone wasn't counting victims. It was counting keepers. I sat the pen down. The grip on my hand tightened instantly. Furious now. dragging the lantern toward the page again. Picks below struck hard enough to shake dust from the beams. Something deep beneath answered with a hollow thud, not metal, but wood. A second chamber far under the mine, trying to open. I shoved the ledger closed. The flame snapped fully orange. For a second, figures became solid. Helmets burned coats. Empty faces turned toward me all at once, and the foreman finally sounded afraid. "Then you hold it." The lantern fused to my hand. Not heat, just weight. Like gravity chose one arm and nowhere else. The tunnel behind me collapsed into darkness as the shaft door pulled itself shut. Iron folding back into place with a scream that echoed up through every tunnel at once. Pick stopped. Total silence. The figures faded one by one, returning to their places facing the sealed door. Waiting again, but the empty space behind them was filled, and it was filled by me. I don't know how long I stood there before the surface returned. Dawn above the trees, cold air, the campsite empty, the lantern still burning in my grip, green once more, and on the rock where the entrance used to be, the number had changed. 20. And sometimes at night, when everything goes quiet, I hear footsteps circling my house. No, they're not trying to get in. They're just making sure I'm still here, holding the light, because the sound under the earth has started again. Clang, clang, clang.